Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how we can use data to make some predictions, especially data from experiments that we do. So let me explain what I did. I did an experiment. I attached a cup to a spring that was suspended above the floor. There's a picture of it. I measured how high the cup was as I added pennies to the cup. Now, as you can imagine, the more pennies I added, the lower the cup went towards the floor and stretched the string out, or the spring out. So here's my data. I want to be able to predict the height of the cup if I put in 30 pennies, but I didn't put in 30 pennies. I want to use my data to predict it. I'm also going to ask some other questions that might be helpful for you as you figure out your project. So that's my data. Let's take a look at how we can use this with our calculator. So for our calculator, we will want to make a new document. So in your home screen, you'll click New Document. Now's the time if you want to save the document you had before. Otherwise, click No. And we're going to want to add a List and Spreadsheets page. This will let us put in our data. We want to give our data some descriptive names. So we'll go up to the very top row, and you'll see that it's got this little tag here, and we can put in descriptive names. So for the first column, I'm going to name that pennies. And then I'm going to go to the second column, and I'm going to name that one height. Don't worry about this second row. This lets us put in an equation for this, and that will not be helpful for us. But for pennies, we'll go down to number 1, and we'll put in our data. So my data was 0, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and 18. And then we'll go in our height column and put in our data here. So here is my data: 78.3, 74.1, 73, 0, 71.9, 67.6, 63.2. Here's our data. It's in our little spreadsheet here. Now we can get a quick look at this. If you push Menu and go down to Data and choose number 9, Quick Graph. This will give us just a quick graph of this over here on the side. Now, this is not really how we want to see our data. It's got height along the x-axis and nothing along the y-axis. So what we'll want to do is we will want to change what's on the x-axis by going down until you see a box around it, and then click Enter or click on it and choose pennies. Now we don't have anything along the y-axis, so we'll go over to there and we'll do the same thing. We'll click Enter and we'll choose height. And you can see this just gives us a quick graph, quick idea of how this looks. So there's definitely a trend here. There's definitely a correlation. I don't want to see this quick graph anymore. So we'll go to the menu, document page. Click the document button and go down to page layout and choose ungroup number 8. And that will separate that into, now it is up here in 1.2. So we know that there is a correlation, and so we can find an equation that best matches that correlation. That's called a linear regression. And it's easy to do with your calculator. Hard to do by hand, but don't worry, you won't ever have to do it by hand. We'll use our calculator for that. So what we'll want to do is we want to move to the column C in the first row, and we'll push menu, and we're going to choose statistics, and we're going to do some stat calculations. And there's two linear regression models here. They're just different ways of talking about the same type of equation. We are studying slope-intercept form. We're going to choose the first one, number 3. When you choose enter here, it's going to ask us, where should I look for the column of x values? Well, that was the column pennies, remember? So we don't want column C. We can just type pennies here. And I'll click tab to go to the next one. The Y list was all of the heights. So we'll put in height. Then it's going to ask me which equation does it want to save the function to. We'll just leave that at F1. And then we'll leave frequency list at 1. And when we go down to the first result column, for some reason on mine that kept showing up as D, but we want that to be C. So we'll change that to C. That just says where it's going to put the results in my spreadsheet. And once you have all of that filled in, click enter. Ooh boy, you got all of this stuff here. So here's what this says. So this is a linear regression. The equation is mx plus b. That's what it looks like. The m value is negative 0.92381, all of this stuff down here. The b value of that equation is 81.07. And then it's got an r squared value, which we won't talk about, an r value, which we talked about a little bit when we talked about correlation. So this has a negative correlation of 0.98. That's a very strong correlation. If you remember, a -1 correlation would be perfect. So this is a very strong correlation. You won't need too much from here, but there is some information to know, like the slope is the m, tells me how much my data changes every time I add something to my independent variable. What we really want to do is take a look at a graph of this. So let's take a look at a graph. Click Control and then the dock button to add a new page. And this page should be a graphs page. Now before we had a quick graph of our data. This is a proper graph which will show our functions. And it's ready for me to input F2. F1, if you push up, you'll see F1 has our data there, or our regression equation. So I'll click enter to show it. Oh, but it doesn't look like anything is there. Well, that's because it's off of my view. We'll adjust our view in a second. First, we're going to add a scatter plot of our data. So to do that, we'll choose Menu, and we'll go down to Graph Entry, and choose Scatter Plot, cleverly enough. And the scatter plot is going to ask me, where am I supposed to get the x values for this? Remember that was pennies, the list pennies. And where am I supposed to get the y values? And that was the list that we called height. And then I choose enter. And it looks like nothing happened. What actually happened is there is a scatter plot, it's just my view doesn't show it. There's an easy way to figure out a good view, and that is to use the zoom menu, the Windows zoom. Now that I've got my scatter plot there, I can use 9, which is zoom data. And this won't work if you don't have the scatter plot. But if you do, then when you choose zoom data, it will choose a view so that you can see your data points. And F1, sure enough, goes through those data points, so we should be seeing that. Now, my question originally was, how high will my cup be if I add 30 pennies? Well, we have a way of figuring that out. We can just trace our regression equation. Do you remember how to do that? Well, first, I noticed that over here, my maximum x value on my graph is 19.7. So I might decide to grab my graph. Oops, I grabbed the wrong thing. Don't grab that. I might decide to just grab my graph here and pull it over. If I go to menu and I choose trace, remember we did this before? We choose graph trace, and it will let me trace. If you look down at the bottom, it says F1 18.6. That's 18.6 pennies would give me a height of 63.9. And I can move my little guy along that graph. I want to jump right to 30 though, so I'm going to just type in 30 and click enter. And it tells me down here, if there's 30 pennies, my height's going to be 53.3 centimeters off the floor. So that answers my original question. But what if I want to know something sort of in reverse? What if I want to know how many pennies do I need to add in order for my height to be 40 centimeters off the ground? I know it's got to be more than 30, but I can't just trace here. I guess I could trace along, but it doesn't seem to want to go forward for me. So I need to do something different. So I'm going to push escape to stop tracing. What I need to do is I need to graph a new function. So we'll type in a new function. Oops. When I push tab to type in a function, it wanted to tell me, or it wanted me to tell it a scatter plot. So I'll push escape and I'll go to menu and I'll go to graph, entry, edit, and choose function. And this function is just the function f2 of x is equal to 40. This is going to be what kind of line? Do you remember? Horizontal line, right? Because there's no slope. And, ooh, it looks like I can't see what that is. So let's see if we can. Oh, my mouse is going crazy here. What's going on? There we go. Let's see if we can grab our screen and, ooh, there is the equation. F2 of x equals 40. So I'm going to grab my screen again and just look for that point where they cross. This intersection point is the point where the y value on my black line, my regression line, is equal to 40. And I know that because the red line is always equal to 40. So I want to calculate what is that point, because I want to know what the x value is. How many pennies will that be? We can do that with our calculator by calculating an intersection point. And that is in, I think, Analyze Graph. Oh, it sure is. Look, number 4, intersection. So we'll choose intersection. And now it's wanting me to choose a point on the left of the intersection point. This one's on the left, so I might as well just click enter. And then it wants me to click an upper bound. That's a point on the right. So you basically just drag this over until you see it's a intersection. And then you can push enter. And that is our intersection point right here, 44.4 and 40. That means 44.4 pennies will give me 40 centimeters off the ground. Now, if I wanted to know what's the most number of pennies I can put into my cup and still be 40 centimeters or more off the ground, I would say 44. If I wanted to know how many pennies in my cup do I have to put in to be less than 44, then I'd say 45. But this intersection gives me a way of finding what that is. Now, you didn't do a pennies in cup experiment. You did a different experiment. But I'm hoping that you can translate what you've seen me do here with this into your experiment. I'll bet you can figure it out. I'll see you guys next week. And remember, math makes sense. Bye.